Hey everyone. In honor of getting monetized on YouTube and hitting 5,000 subscribers, I thought I'd make a video that's a little more personal than other ones that Rohit and I have made in the past, which delves a little bit into who I am and what was my path to get into consulting. A question that I get a lot whenever people, hop on the phone to talk to me or reach out on LinkedIn. I'll of course talk about my background, where I came from, as well as the things that led me into consulting, and try to focus on any tips or advice that I have. So let's just jump right in. My name is Neel, and I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. That's where my parents, who are from India, moved to, and then where I was born and raised. In New Orleans, I had a pretty normal life, I would say. It was a lot about playing sports, hanging out with friends, playing video games, and then doing well in school. And that kind of continued until I was 15 years old, so going into my sophomore year. That year, my parents actually forced me, against my will initially, to go to a boarding school in North Louisiana, which is about 4 hours away from where I was in New Orleans. That school was called the Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts, and so you could imagine it was a giant nerd school. But the first night there, I loved it, and part of the reason I loved it was because it was a boarding school. And so at the age of 15, I was no longer living in my parents' house, and I was going to a school that was a lot more difficult academically, and not just in math and science, but also in English and history. But like I mentioned, I really loved it. I played basketball there just like I did at my previous school, but the change was because I was at a nerd school, I went from being the worst kid on my basketball team to being one of the best. And so that was a lot of fun. I also met a lot of really awesome friends who I'm still in touch with today, and then was challenged academically in a way that I really enjoyed. As my senior year of high school approached, I of course started thinking about what colleges I would want to go to and what I'd want to major in. I knew I wanted to do something related to math and science because that's what I really enjoyed up until that point. And so that's why I later on picked mechanical engineering. Specifically, I wanted to work within human space exploration, so for a company like SpaceX, because I had a really big passion and love of astronomy that started when I was, honestly, before I could even remember. And so I picked mechanical engineering or aerospace engineering, depending on what school I was applying to for those reasons. And I applied to a wide variety of schools. Some, kind of at the top tier, MIT, Stanford, and then others that were more safety schools or schools that I knew I could get money to, like UT Dallas, which is where I ended up going. And so let's transition out to college. I went to the University of Texas at Dallas, where I majored in mechanical engineering. The reason that I picked UT Dallas was, there was a lot of reasons, but it can all kind of be summed up into one big reason, which is because I was really lucky to get a scholarship called the McDermott Scholarship. In short, that scholarship was too good for me to pass up. And then the other schools that I got into, especially some of the more brand name private schools, were just way too expensive. I wasn't going to pay $40,000, $50,000 a year, or even $20,000 a year at good public schools like UT Austin. And so UT Dallas is where I ended up going. As y'all might have remembered from earlier, my parents had lived in New Orleans. One thing that was convenient while I was going to the Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts was that my parents coincidentally moved to Dallas after my junior year, I believe. And so when I was going to school in that Louisiana high school, my senior year, my parents were living in Dallas. And then when I graduated and chose to go to UT Dallas, I happened to pick a school that was 25 minutes from where my parents lived. And so funny enough, I went to college living closer to my parents, even though I still lived on campus, than when I did in high school. So now let's dive into my college experience. College was a lot of fun for a lot of reasons, but I'm sure the main question that y'all are thinking is, how did I transition from majoring in mechanical engineering to being interested in consulting and then eventually getting an internship at Bain? I think it actually starts in my senior year of high school, where I went to a finalist weekend for that scholarship that I got at UT Dallas. They basically fly in all of the people who get selected as finalists to come and do a weekend of interviews. And during that weekend, I heard some stories from the current seniors in college in that scholarship program, one of whom had gotten into McKinsey from UT Dallas. And he was the first person to get into McKinsey. And I was like, man, what the heck is McKinsey? I've never even heard of that before. And then someone told me it's the best management consulting firm. And I was like, I don't even know what management consulting is. So, that doesn't help that much either, but okay, cool. It sounds prestigious and good for him. And so that's kind of where I first got the introduction to management consulting, and then learned a little bit more about it throughout my freshman year, but through just other people hearing the buzz about it, and then that guy would come and talk a little bit about it as well. But then during that year, that freshman year, I was really honing in on engineering activities, and so I joined things like a robotics team. I started doing academic research and material science, just any opportunities that I could that could let me build my engineering resume so that I could eventually get an internship at a SpaceX or a Blue Origin. But I pretty quickly found out that I didn't like those activities. I think I fell into the trap my freshman year that a lot of freshmen fall into, which is that they sign up for way too many things, which I think was a good idea at the time. But then after a couple months of getting a little bit burned out and stretched thin, I started realizing the things that I was more excited about going to and the things that I was less excited about going to. And a lot of the things I was less excited about were a lot of my engineering involvements, like the Society of Mechanical Engineers or the robotics team. And so I quickly started to realize, like, oh, maybe this mechanical engineering thing, or at least these clubs and activities, aren't for me, and my interests might lie somewhere else. But it was still, of course, way too early for me to make a solid decision. I didn't change my major. I didn't start applying to different things or looking outside of engineering. I just started finding different ways of being able to explore my engineering interests. But then the main experience that helped me shape an understanding of consulting happened the summer after my freshman year. That summer, I went to China for a couple weeks. I did a short study abroad, but then after that, for the rest of the summer, I conducted material science research at the lab of a friend of the professor I was working with previously at UT Dallas. This was in Duke, which is in North Carolina, and I was doing more material science research kind of along the same vein of what I had been doing previously. But the funny thing was, the PhD student that I was working with, he was a guy in his, I think, second to last year of his PhD, so pretty close to being done. And then the two other guys that I knew pretty closely, all three of them, all guys in their, last year of their PhD within material science, so a really technical thing, were applying for and trying to do cases and everything to prepare for consulting interviews. And so I had heard about it before, and I was like, oh, interesting. Okay, so you guys are doing that too. That's really cool to know. And funny enough, all three of them actually work at BCG right now, so they were pretty successful in it. That summer was me, of course, doing material science research, but more importantly, picking their brains constantly about why they wanted to go into consulting, what they liked about it, and then also just being in the room whenever they would be doing case preps. And sometimes I would even ask them, hey, could you run me through a market sizing? Because I thought that they were pretty fun, right? And then he of course hit me with the classic question, like, how many golf balls can you fit inside of an airplane? And so I just found those things to be really exciting, and they were like, yeah, if you find the casing process itself to be exciting, this might be something that you might want to look into. But of course that'll be hard for you because you come from a relatively no-name school, and they weren't lying. UT Dallas had sent one person to McKinsey up until this point, and no one else anywhere else. And so I knew I had an uphill battle, but I was interested in it, and I knew a little bit more about consulting to be able to prepare for it. But I also knew that this being the end of my freshman year, it was way too early for me to actually do anything about it. I knew that I had some time, basically between then and then the beginning of my junior year, to continue pursuing my interest in engineering and testing that out before actually committing to consulting about a year and a half later. So after that summer, I started my sophomore year. And the goal for that year for me was to get an engineering internship. One that I thought would help me understand whether engineering is right for me or not. And then if it's not right for me, that would then give me free liberty for the next summer and the next year after that to be able to pursue consulting interviews. And so I was lucky to land an opportunity with Bell Helicopter, which is just a company that I'm sure you can guess makes helicopters both for commercial and defense reasons. I was there a mechanical engineering intern. Otherwise, throughout that year, I continued my involvements that I had been in my freshman year. So some of them being a senator in our student government, being an ambassador for our student ambassador program, playing ultimate frisbee, and then I think doing one or two engineering extracurriculars, but yeah, those aren't things I can't think of now, so it's not really that important. I realized by this point that doing a bunch of engineering things wasn't what I wanted to do, and instead focused on what I enjoyed doing, which was being around people, being in organizations that I found purpose in. And so basically, I guess the mini tip there was, especially if you're interested in consulting, you really can just take the freedom to pursue things that you find interesting. Because the good thing about consulting is they want people who are smart and have demonstrated either impact or leadership. And that could mean a variety of different things. There's no one specific way that you demonstrate leadership. And so I was lucky in that I was able to follow the things that I wanted and kind of let go of that part of myself that thought I needed to do engineering things for the sake of doing engineering things because that was my major. But yeah, so fast forward to the end of my sophomore year, I'm now going to intern at Bell Helicopter. Overall, that was a pretty good internship in terms of, the work that I got, the people that I was exposed to, and then the understanding of engineering that I was able to develop outside of the classroom. But it was also a good summer for me to realize that there was no way I wanted to be an entry-level engineer. I talked to the people who were doing the full-time role, in their first year of the job, and that just was not a future I wanted for myself for a variety of reasons. Some of them being that the problems that these people were solving, I didn't find that interesting. And then the technical problems that they were solving were things that they would have to be on for potentially 18 to 24 months at the very minimum. And so I thought that was way too long for me to be on one specific problem. And then also the career trajectory, being able to climb up the ladder, for lack of a better phrase, was really, really slow as well. And I wanted something that would allow me to learn a lot in a quick amount of time, and then I would be able to hopefully get the benefit of that from a career perspective as well, in terms of exit opportunities or just opportunities internally. And so I thought engineering wasn't that place for me. And then of course other things like lifestyle and then financial compensation weren't that great. But luckily throughout that summer, because it was a pretty chill internship, it was a strict 40-hour-a-week thing, I had a lot of free time to be able to do casing. And so by this point I had known that like after a couple weeks in the internship, engineering wasn't for me, consulting was what I wanted to pursue. And so I had reached out to a couple friends, one friend in particular who I ended up casing with a lot over that summer. So what we would do is every Tuesday and Thursday, I think, I would book a conference room and then actually like Skype him and we would case. That was a really good way for me to use my time, especially whenever I didn't have too much work with my engineering internship. And that's something that I might advise y'all as well. There are creative ways that you can build in casing to your otherwise busy summer. And I think if you're serious about consulting, that's something that I think I would strongly advise as well. But yeah, so that summer ended with me knowing I didn't want to go into engineering and having had maybe 20 to 30 cases under my belt before coming back to campus. And then by that point, I had also started reaching out to people within consulting. I knew that I needed to contact people. I needed to get my name in the door, but then also I needed to understand better what consulting was. Because I came from a school where there were no people who were in consulting in terms of alumni, I needed to better understand if this was actually a career that I wanted to take or not. And so the best way I knew to do that was just to reach out to people on LinkedIn. And of course it felt pretty weird at first, but after some people started getting back to me, after I started realizing like, hey, I can hold interesting conversations with these people and I can enjoy them and they seem to not hate it as well, I continued doing that, and I think that sure had a part to play. Now at this point, we're at the beginning of my junior year where I have finalized my resume. I'm continuing to case with people on campus, and I'm also reaching out to people within the firms that I was applying to, which at this point was just the big three, to understand more what their life was like, how it was, and then also any advice that they had, considering that I was coming from a school that wasn't traditionally looked at by these companies. One thing that I did do that I would recommend everyone applying to consulting, especially to the big three, to do is to have backup plans. My backup plan that summer was to continue pursuing engineering, but potentially in a way that was much more interesting to me than the internship at Bell Helicopter was. I was talking with some people within a company, it's a startup called the Ocean Cleanup, where they basically make large machines that would go into the ocean and clean up vast amounts of garbage. And I found that pretty inspiring. I loved their mission, and they were also in the Netherlands. And so my scholarship that I had mentioned way earlier would have sponsored me to essentially go to the Netherlands so that I could just do a volunteering engineering internship. So there was no way they could have said no unless they didn't want me there. So basically what I'm saying is I had a pretty cool backup plan, or a plan B, in case consulting didn't work out. And so that was something that allowed me to better live my life. If I didn't get the internship offer from Bain or from any of the other companies, I would have still been really excited about this other plan B. And so I of course know that I had a lot of resources and opportunities to find it, and I was in a really lucky situation. Hopefully y'all can find yourselves in a similar one, but if not, I'm sure that there's still a way that you're able to grind and find really cool opportunities outside of the more mainstream ones that you're looking into. Going into consulting things, I had my eyes set on McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. I had this plan B going, and so eventually interviews roll around. I'm lucky enough to get first round interviews from all three, McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. The first one I think was McKinsey's, and I actually took it from this very room. It was a digital interview, and I had a desk over there, and I thought it went decently well. I actually thought that my first round McKinsey interview went the best, followed by my BCG first round, which was in person, and then followed by my Bain first round, which was also virtual. But the funny thing was the Bain first round was the only one that converted into a final round interview. And then I went eventually in person to the final round interview at Bain, thought that I did pretty well, but left it feeling like they could call me and either tell me I got it or I didn't get it, and both would make sense. I thought that I did pretty well, but I knew that the competition was really high. And then I remember this very clearly. I was driving to a Chipotle for a fundraiser for a club that I was doing, and I was driving a bunch of people in my car, and then I get a call. Usually I don't answer the phone if I'm driving, but this was the day of the interview later on that night, and so I knew that that could potentially be it. So I answer it, and then it was one of the partners who had interviewed me. And he told me, hey, you got the offer, Neel, congrats. And I was, of course, really happy, but I was more concerned about listening to him and then also not trying to kill my friends while I was driving. And so that was really good news. And that was kind of the start of my consulting career. I knew that going into this whole process, if I got an offer at any of these firms, I was going to sign it and I was going to go work there full time because I knew this is what I had wanted. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit of a background about myself, basically from when I was born up until the moment I got my internship offer at Bain. But before I end the video, just want to leave you all with a couple pieces of advice. Nothing too groundbreaking, but things that I think helped me a lot during my process. The first one was, especially if you're looking into consulting, do whatever you want to do in college. Do what you find fun, where your passions lie. A good way that I've been able to find those kinds of things is by overloading myself initially at the beginning of your freshman or sophomore year, or whatever year you might be in, with things that you find interesting or you think you'll find interesting and want to do. And then after a couple weeks or maybe a couple months, you'll start being able to tell which ones you find actually interesting versus which ones when you go to, you're like I don't want to do this, or I wish I wasn't part of that, and then just quit, right? Or do it respectfully and not burning bridges. And I think also one thing I should caveat is you should be really careful about not burning yourself out permanently, making sure that you're keeping track of how you feel, journal, meditate, talk to friends, talk to your parents, whomever is around you and cares about you. Make sure to keep them up to date on how these things are feeling, so that you're not just going through a struggle of overburdening yourself or stretching yourself too thin for too long, because it can be tiring, but it's through that process of stretching yourself out, you're able to see what things give you energy and what things you look forward to versus what things take energy from you and things you don't like. So that's the first piece of advice I would give. Second is, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, is just have a plan B. Try to think through what are some other exciting options that you will want to pursue outside of consulting. Consulting is cool and flashy and all, but there are a lot of really cool things and important problems you can go solve in the world. And so I think being able to have an understanding that consulting isn't the end all be all, that a lot of people are successful even if they don't go into consulting, and sometimes probably because they didn't go into consulting. And so keeping that in mind, I think, is really important, so that you don't end up at the end of your junior or your senior years having put a lot of time into case prep, and then the number game that consulting applications just doesn't work in your favor, especially if you're coming from a school where there might not be a strong pipeline. But that's about it for general advice right now. I'm not really that good at giving general advice, so I'll try to get better at that going forward. But if you like this kind of video, then I'm happy to make more videos like this, where I talk about topics from anything from what my prep process was more specifically, and what I did on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. I can talk about how the internship was. I can talk about how full-time work has been, as well as specific cases or what my schedule looked like. Any of those kinds of topics I'm happy to talk about. I just want to know whatever is most interesting for y'all. Or if you think I should focus more effort with Rohit on making more casing series videos, then we're happy to do that as well. Just let us know. But otherwise, hope you all enjoyed the video. As usual, if you enjoyed it, give us a like, give us a comment about what you think as well, and we'll see y'all for the next video.